When my grandma passed last year, that favoritism didn't just hurt my feelings. It turned into something that crossed a legal line, and the fallout finally forced everyone to see what I'd been seeing for years. I'm a guy in my early 30s. I'm the oldest. My parents had me young, and from the time I could walk, I was hearing, be a good example and don't make things harder. Evan was born 4 years later and instantly became the center of the house. If I did well, it was expected. If Evan did anything at all, it was celebrated. My childhood wasn't abusive in the dramatic headline way. It was more like living in a house where the thermostat was set to Evan and everyone else just adjusted. If he was happy, the day was good. If he was upset, the day became a crisis. I learned quickly that my role was to be low maintenance. My grandma, my dad's mom, was the one person who didn't treat me like an accessory. She showed up. She listened. She'd call me my steady one, like it was something she was proud of, not something I was forced into. She'd ask about school and actually wait for the answer. When I got my first real job, she asked me to explain what accounting was, then acted like spreadsheets were basically wizardry. She wasn't perfect, but she was consistent. And in my family, consistency was rare. Early incidents. The pattern was never one big dramatic moment. It was death by 1,000 paper cuts. When I was in middle school, I started doing odd jobs. Mowing lawns, shoveling snow, basic neighbor kid stuff. I saved cash in an envelope in my dresser because I wanted a phone like everyone else. One day the envelope was lighter. I asked my mom about it, and she got offended that I even asked. Like the question itself was the crime. "Are you accusing your own mother?" she snapped. 2 days later, Evan got the exact shoes he'd been begging for. I remember looking at them and thinking, so that's where my pocket money went. When I was 16, I got grounded because my dad's drill went missing. I swore I hadn't touched it. I searched the garage like a maniac, because my dad was the type to turn a missing tool into a character flaw. A week later, Evan casually admitted he'd let a friend borrow it. My parents laughed and said, "Boys will be boys." No apology, no "we were wrong." Just me learning that reality in our house was flexible as long as it protected Evan. My senior year of high school, I got accepted into a state university with a decent scholarship, and it wasn't Harvard, but I was proud. I told my parents, and my dad did the tight smile thing and said, "Good, that'll look nice on a resume." That was it. No dinner, no celebration. Meanwhile, when Evan got into an overpriced private college with mediocre grades, my mom cried happy tears and posted about my baby's bright future like he'd cured cancer. Then came the money talk. When I turned 18, my dad sat me down and said, "We're not paying for your college. We'll help when we can, but you're the oldest, you understand." I understood. I took out loans. I worked. I lived on ramen and whatever was on sale. 2 years later, they helped when they could by taking out a parent loan for Evan. They also bought him a used Jeep for safety. I drove a beater that smelled like spilled coffee and had a window that only rolled down if you threatened it. In college, my mom would call me crying about bills. I'd send money because I still had that programmed guilt response. Then I'd see photos of my parents taking Evan out to celebrate his hard semester or paying for his spring break trip because he deserves it. If I asked about it, my mom said, "Don't keep score. That's unhealthy." Somehow it was only unhealthy when I did it. There was also the constant gaslighting. If I said, "It hurts that you treat Evan differently," my dad would say, "We don't. You're imagining things." If I gave examples, my mom would sigh and say, "Why are you so negative?" If I got upset, they'd call me dramatic. Evan learned he could borrow, break, and lie, and the adults would rearrange the story until he was the victim. I know how this sounds. Like petty sibling stuff. I told myself that for years too. Maybe I'm overreacting. Maybe this is normal. It's amazing what you'll normalize when you grow up in it. After college, I took an accounting job a few hours away, and moved into a tiny apartment with mismatched furniture. The peace was unreal. I didn't realize how tense I'd been my whole life until I had a place where nobody rolled their eyes when I spoke. I still tried to have a relationship with my parents, but it was always on their terms. If I didn't answer a call, my mom would text, "Are you mad at us?" If I said I couldn't come down for a random Sunday dinner, my dad would make comments like, "Ever since you moved away, you think you're better than us." Evan only texted when he needed something, usually with a brew and a Venmo request. I started setting simple boundaries. No more money, no more last-minute favors, no more emotional interrogations. They hated it. My mom leaned hard on, "Family's all we have." My dad leaned hard on, "After everything we've done for you." Evan leaned hard on, "Relax, it's not a big deal." Grandma stayed my anchor through all of that. I called her every Sunday. Sometimes she'd get quiet and say things like, "Your parents mean well, but they don't always choose right." It was the closest she ever came to criticizing them, and it told me she'd noticed more than she admitted. Grandma's health declined pretty quickly. She was in her late 80s and stubborn in that old school way, where she'd rather struggle than admit she needs help. I started driving down for appointments, picking up prescriptions, doing the boring practical stuff that keeps someone safe. My parents were around, but it felt like they were managing appearances. My mom loved organizing, which in her language means taking control of anything that could be turned into a story about her. Evan would pop in long enough to be seen, bring a coffee, take a photo with Grandma, then disappear. I'm not saying he never cared at all. I'm saying he cared the way you care about a public image. Grandma noticed. One night I was helping her sort mail at her kitchen table, and she said softly, "Your brother is charming, but charm isn't character." Then she patted my hand and said, "You have character." She passed in her sleep in October. It wasn't shocking, but it still wrecked me. She was the only adult who made me feel like I wasn't crazy for noticing how uneven things were. The funeral was a blur of casseroles and awkward hugs. Evan cried loudly in front of people, then wandered off like nothing happened. My mom held court with relatives, telling stories about how she took care of Grandma every day. I bit my tongue so hard I'm surprised I didn't need stitches. A week after the funeral, my dad called and said, "We need to talk about your grandma's estate. We're handling it." Those 3 words, "we're handling it," made my stomach drop. I drove down that weekend. My parents sat me at the kitchen table like I was about to be punished. Evan was there too, oddly cheerful, like he'd already been promised a prize. My dad slid a folder toward me and said, "Your grandma left everything to Evan." I stared at him. "What?" My mom jumped in instantly. "Honey, we know this is hard, but Evan needs more support. You're doing fine." Evan did this fake sad face and said, "I didn't ask for it. Grandma just understood." They showed me a will dated 6 months before Grandma died. It left the house, her savings, everything to Evan. I got sentimental items. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just said, who was her attorney? They named the local attorney Grandma had used for years. "Can I see the original?" I asked. My mom's eyes flashed. "Why? You think we forged it?" I said, "I want to see the original." My dad got angry, called me ungrateful, and Evan smirked like he'd already won. I left before I said something I couldn't take back. The next morning, I called the attorney's office myself. The receptionist put me on hold, then came back sounding confused. "Sir, our file lists you as the executor," she said, "and the estate is split evenly between you and Evan." I felt cold all over. I drove to the office that day. The attorney pulled the will from their file. It was dated 2 years earlier, signed, notarized, and crystal clear, 50-50 split. I was the executor. There was also a clause that basically said if someone tried to undermine the will with fraudulent documents, it could impact their share. I showed him the copy my parents gave me. His expression changed immediately. "That is not one of ours," he said. He didn't accuse my parents by name, but he didn't have to. The air in the room did that for him. When I told my parents the attorney had a different will on file, my mom went icy and my dad went loud. "You went behind our backs," my mom said, like I'd committed a crime by calling a lawyer. "You're tearing this family apart," my dad yelled. I said, "No, you tried to lie to my face." Evan tried the maybe grandma changed it act, but he couldn't keep his story straight. My parents started offering compromises almost immediately. "What if Evan keeps the house and you take the savings?" That told me everything. They weren't protecting grandma's wishes. They were protecting Evan's lifestyle. As executor, I filed the real will with probate and followed my attorney's advice to freeze grandma's accounts. 2 days later, the bank called me and asked if I knew about recent transfers. I didn't. They told me that in the week after grandma died, before I froze anything, most of her savings had been moved into an account under Evan's name. I sat on my couch and just stared at the wall, because the fake will wasn't just a family misunderstanding. They were draining her estate in real time. I called Evan. He played dumb for about 5 seconds, then admitted, "Mom and Dad said it was fine. They said since you're being weird about the will, we should keep it simple." Simple, meaning take it before I could stop them. I said, "You moved money from grandma's account after she died." He snapped, "Don't say it like that." "How should I say it?" I asked. He got defensive fast. "You always do this. You always have to be right. You always make me the bad guy." I said, "I'm not making you anything." He hung up. When the bank froze Evan's account during the investigation, he panicked and blew up my phone. My parents went nuclear. I got messages from random relatives about how I was greedy and making grandma's death about money. One aunt I barely talked to actually said, "Maybe if you visited more, grandma would have left you something." I replied, "Ask hospice who was there," and blocked her. I kept answering everyone the same way. "I'm the executor. There's evidence of fraud. I'm handling it legally." They hated that I wouldn't argue emotionally. They couldn't twist paperwork. Evan tried to drag the drama to my front door. One Friday, he showed up at my apartment unannounced, pounding like he owned the place. I didn't open the door. I called building security and told them someone was refusing to leave. Security escorted him out. No screaming match, no scene, just the quiet humiliation of being removed like a stranger. He texted me afterward, "You really called security on your own brother?" I replied, "Don't come here again." The bank's investigation found that at least one transfer authorization had a signature that didn't match grandma's, and the notary information was wrong. My attorney told me I needed to file a police report, not for revenge, but because failing to act could put me in legal trouble as executor. So I did, calmly, with documentation. That's when the lies started collapsing. Evan posted vague stuff online about betrayal. My mom told people I was trying to put my brother in jail. My dad said I was dead to him. For a while, it felt like I'd lost my entire family in 1 month. But once professionals got involved, feelings mattered less than facts. Probate rejected the fake will, once the attorney confirmed the original on file and pointed out inconsistencies. The court ordered the legitimate will followed. Evan had to answer questions he couldn't charm his way out of. Where did the fake will come from? Why were funds moved after grandma's death? Why didn't the signatures match? His stories kept changing. First it was, "Grandma told me." Then it was, "Mom said it was okay." Then it was, "I thought I had permission." Then it was, "You forced me into this." He blamed stress. He blamed grief. He blamed literally everyone except himself. My parents tried to do what they always do, step in and smooth things over with authority and tears. It didn't work. Investigators don't care that you're someone's mother. Judges don't care that you're offended. One of the biggest shocks for me was realizing how powerless my parents were outside the family bubble. For my entire life, they controlled the story. Out in the real world, the story had to match the paperwork. Eventually, the judge ruled that Evan's attempt to use fraudulent documents was bad faith and applied the clause in Grandma's will. Evan's share was reduced. He was also ordered to repay what could be recovered and pay back the rest over time. So the kid who was always protected from consequences finally got consequences. Paperwork consequences, not movie revenge, the kind that actually sticks. After one hearing, my mom tried to corner me in the courthouse hallway, red-eyed and furious. "How can you live with yourself?" she hissed. I looked at her and said, "How could you do this to Grandma?" She opened her mouth, then closed it. No answer, just tears and anger, and the realization that her usual script wasn't working. People keep calling this revenge, but honestly, the most satisfying part wasn't watching Evan sweat in court. It was watching the family dynamic hit a wall it couldn't manipulate. I didn't yell, I didn't threaten, I didn't show up at Thanksgiving to drop a bomb. I just stopped playing along and let the system do what it does when you bring receipts. And because I stayed calm, Evan kept escalating in stupid ways. He tried to get my girlfriend, now fiancée, to talk sense into me. She told him politely to stop contacting her. He tried again. She blocked him. He tried to get relatives to pressure me. Some did. A few eventually apologized when they realized my parents had fed them a version of events that left out the whole fake will and post-death bank transfers parts. Others doubled down and told me I should handle it privately, which, in my experience, is code for let the golden child get away with it. Then Evan's own life started cracking. His girlfriend at the time found out what was happening, asked me if it was real, and I told her the truth without trashing him. She broke up with him anyway. Turns out charm doesn't work as well when there's a bank investigation attached to it. His friends distanced themselves when they realized he was suddenly broke and angry all the time. My parents, who used to cover his rent and spot him money, were suddenly dealing with legal fees and embarrassment and didn't have endless energy to keep patching his holes. That's the part nobody talks about with favoritism. Eventually, the golden child becomes a grown adult who can't function without someone bending reality for them. When reality finally stops bending, it's not pretty. Update 1, about 2 weeks later. The bank recovered some of the money, but not all of it. A chunk was already gone. I saw statements that made my eye twitch. Electronics, travel, and a bunch of business purchases that looked more like impulse spending than anything else. The court set up a repayment plan. Evan is now on a tight leash financially, which is the exact opposite of how he's lived for years. My parents keep saying I should forgive him because he's depressed. I told them consequences aren't cruelty, and if he's struggling, he needs a therapist, not a bailout. Update 2, a couple months later. Evan called me late at night, drunk and emotional, and admitted my mom helped him access Grandma's papers. He said she thought Grandma was being unfair to him and wanted to fix it. He also said my dad knew and went along with it because he didn't want conflict. That confession matched what the evidence already suggested. I recorded the call, legal where I live, confirmed with my attorney. I didn't blast it online or send it to relatives. I gave it to my attorney because I was done being the only honest person in the room. My mom stopped talking to me completely. My dad sent one text. Hope it was worth it. Update 3, 6 months later. Some extended family has quietly switched sides now that the dust is settling. A couple of them reached out and said, "We didn't know the whole story." I'm not throwing a parade about it, but it does feel validating after being treated like the problem for so long. Also, Evan tried to show up at Grandma's house with a realtor before probate was even finalized. The realtor asked who the executor was. Evan apparently said, "My brother, but he'll sign." The realtor called my attorney to confirm. Evan got shut down hard. I'm told he was furious and blamed me for humiliating him. I'm not sure how you expect to sell a house you don't own and not get embarrassed, but okay. Update 4, about a year later. I'm engaged now. We're planning a small wedding. My parents aren't invited. That sentence still hurts, but it also feels like choosing peace for the first time in my life. Evan reached out, asking to start over. I told him, I'm glad he's getting help, but any relationship we ever have will be limited and on my terms. No money, no favors, no family meetings, and the first time he lies, I'm out. He called that punishment. I called it boundaries. The estate is mostly settled. Selling Grandma's house was rough, but keeping it would have chained me to the same family circus. I kept the things that mattered: her quilt, her recipe box, a couple little knickknacks that still make me think of her. The rest went where it needed to go. The inheritance didn't make me rich. It did help me pay down student loans and put a down payment on a modest place. The bigger shift wasn't financial, though. It was realizing I wasn't wrong all those years. I wasn't too sensitive. I was just paying attention. My parents still tell people I sued the family. That's not exactly how it worked, but they need a story where Evan is the victim and I'm the villain. I've accepted I can't compete with the version of reality they've rehearsed for decades. I used to think justice was loud, like someone would finally stand up at a dinner table and say, "You were right," and everything would click into place. Real justice was quieter: a will on file, bank records, a judge who didn't care about my mom's tears, and boundaries I kept even when it hurt. I lost the fantasy that my parents would ever choose me over Evan, but I gained something that matters more now: self-respect, peace, and the ability to love people from a distance when they won't stop hurting you. Grandma used to tell me, "You can be kind without being available." I didn't really get it until all of this happened. Now I do.